Imagine looking at what might honestly be history's most mind-bending paradox. Today, we are exploring a 5,000-year-old civilization that was repeatedly conquered, shattered, and occupied, yet somehow never erased. Most empires rise and fall, eventually vanishing completely into the genetic and cultural melting pot of history. But the civilization that emerged on the Iranian plateau, well, they did something completely, absolutely inexplicable.
See, throughout history, the greatest empires in the world made the exact same fatal mistake. They marched right onto the Iranian plateau, absolutely certain they could just wipe this civilization off the face of the earth. We're talking about the formidable Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander the Great, ruthless Roman legions, sweeping Arab armies, and the ferocious Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. These invaders literally tore through, leaving behind nothing but towers of skulls. Now, any other nation, like, say, the Babylonians or the Assyrians, would have permanently vanished after suffering such catastrophic, devastating blows. But not here.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer. How exactly did Iran manage, from antiquity right up to the present day, to force every single major world power to reckon with it? How did they manage to preserve their identity? Time and time again, despite losing on the battlefield, losing their capitals, and enduring brutal occupations, the Iranians did something no one else could do. They absorbed their conquerors. They essentially digested the West and the nomads. To understand the depth of this incredible cultural immune system, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. 1. Inventing time and diplomacy. 2. The first global superpower. 3. Absorbing the invaders. 4. The rebirth of identity. And 5. The modern paradox. Part 1. Inventing time and diplomacy. To truly grasp this whole story, we actually need to correct a massive historical injustice first. Traditionally, the Western world considers ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, meaning Sumer and Babylon, to be the exclusive cradles of civilization, right? But that worldview totally sidelines a massive piece of the puzzle. Human evolution took its natural course here, starting roughly 50,000 years ago, but the real revolution kicked off a bit later. Archaeologists have actually discovered urban settlements on Iranian territory dating back 6,000 to 7,000 years, proving that one of the oldest civilizations on the planet evolved right here. And incredibly, in the 23rd century BC, the state of Elam signed a written treaty with the Akkadian king Naram-Sin. This guaranteed Elam's independence on the condition that they aligned their foreign policy with Akkad. I mean, really think about that for a second. This is the first documented international treaty in human history. The Iranian space literally stood at the very origins of global diplomacy. Now, the people we actually call Iranians today arrived a bit later, somewhere between the 20th and 15th centuries BC. These were nomadic tribes descending from the northern steppes of Central Asia. And amazingly, their ancient language was a direct relative of Latin, Greek, and modern European languages, like the English we're using right now. They called themselves Aryans, which simply meant noble, and they named their new homeland the Land of the Aryans. Over time, that phrase naturally morphed into the familiar name we know today, Iran. But here's the real kicker. Their ultimate early weapon wasn't chariots or bows, it was ideology. Long before Christianity and Islam came onto the scene, Zoroastrianism was born on the Iranian plateau, and it completely turned human consciousness upside down. See, ancient humans perceived time as a circle, just a meaningless cyclical changing of seasons. But Zoroastrianism invented the concept of linear time. Instead of a meaningless circle, they believed the world actually had a distinct beginning, a creation, and would have an inevitable end, a massive final battle between the light of Ahura Mazda and the absolute evil of Achaemenid, culminating in a last judgment. This whole idea of linear time later flowed directly into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It is literally the very coordinate system you and I use to think about the world today. Part 2. The first global superpower. So by 550 BC, a visionary named Cyrus the Great managed to unite the Persian and Median tribes to build the Achaemenid Empire. And what made Cyrus entirely different from the brutal tyrants of the past was his approach. When he conquered Babylon or the Greek city-states, he didn't just smash their temples or enslave everyone. He actually built an empire founded on respect. And the scale of this whole thing was just unimaginably huge. 50 million people. Under Cyrus's successor, Darius I, the empire's borders expanded all the way from Egypt to the Indus Valley. Nearly 50 million people lived under Persian rule. To put that into perspective, at the time, that was literally half the population of the entire Earth. Of course, to manage half the globe, they needed some unprecedented administration. Darius divided the country into 20 administrative regions called satrapies.
He introduced a unified tax system across the board, minted gold Daric coins to completely standardize trade, and laid down a massive network of roads carrying what was basically the world's fastest state postal service. The infrastructure was a total administrative marvel that kept this giant empire running with blistering efficiency. But, as we know, history absolutely does not forgive weakness. In an attempt to secure his massive empire from nomadic raids, Cyrus the Great ventured up into Central Asia to fight the Massagetæ tribe. It did not go well. The battle was a brutal slaughter, and the Persian army was entirely annihilated. The tribal leader, Queen Tomiris, seeking revenge for her own son's death, supposedly had Cyrus beheaded. The story goes that she threw his severed head into a sack filled with human blood, delivering this chilling line, "You thirsted for blood, now drink your fill." Yet despite losing their famous founder in such a violent way, the empire thrived. Now, we constantly hear the classic Western myth of the Greco-Persian Wars, right? The famous 300 Spartans valiantly crushing the Persians. But honestly, for the giant Achaemenid Empire, losing a few fringe cities was basically like a mosquito bite. The Persians simply changed up their tactics. They just started funding rival Greek factions, first Athens, then Sparta, pitting them against each other. By 387 BC, the totally exhausted Greeks signed a humiliating treaty. Basically, what the Persians couldn't take with an army, they just bought. They became the undisputed masters of Greece without firing a single shot. Part 3. Absorbing the invaders. Eventually, though, the central government weakened, and a series of absolute historical catastrophes arrived right at their doorstep. We're talking crushing blows that would normally erase a culture entirely. In 330 BC, Alexander the Great's elite Macedonian phalanxes ruthlessly crushed the Persian army and actually burned Persepolis to the ground. Jump forward to 651 AD, and after centuries of exhausting, endless wars with Rome, the Arab Caliphate swept in, bringing an entirely new religion and ending the Sassanid dynasty. And then, the absolute apocalypse in 1220 AD. Genghis Khan arrived. His forces slaughtered entire cities and wiped thousand-year-old irrigation systems right off the map. It really seemed like Iran was finished for good. But this is exactly where their incredible cultural immune system kicked into overdrive. First, these brutal invaders would physically win the war and occupy the plateau. But then, well, within a few decades, Alexander the Great was literally wearing Persian clothes. Later on, the Islamic Arab caliphs, especially the Abbasids, began relying heavily on Persian scholars and bureaucrats to run their own empire. And even those harsh Mongols who built the Ilkhanate, they suddenly made Persian the official language of the state, converted to Islam, and started funding grandiose Persian mosques. So the military conquerors absolutely won the physical battles, but they were culturally reprogrammed into Persians. Part 4. The rebirth of identity. So for almost 300 years, Iran was this boiling cauldron of Turkish and Mongol dynasties that had been completely culturally digested. But from this cauldron, an incredibly powerful, rigid new identity was forged. And the absolutely crucial turning point is right here, the year 1501. A man named Shah Ismail reunited the country and officially founded the Safavid state. The Safavids made a really radical pivot. They made Shia Islam the official state religion. This single move permanently and strictly separated Iran, both culturally and politically, from the predominantly Sunni Islamic world surrounding them, including the massive neighboring Ottoman Empire. They essentially carved out a highly unique, standalone identity once again. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and the nation faced a totally new kind of invasion. Following some really severe internal crises and territorial losses, Iran essentially became the backdrop for what historians call the Great Game. The country was effectively carved up into spheres of influence by colonial powers. You had the British Empire heavily pumping Iranian oil, while the Russian Empire actually had troops stationed right there in the north. The entire country was slowly suffocating under the immense weight of foreign dominance. Part 5. The Modern Paradox. The 20th century basically turned the country into a tense, global chessboard, forcing the nation to assert itself in an entirely new way. In 1935, following a military coup that brought Reza Shah Pahlavi to power, he made a move that really shook up global diplomacy. For centuries, the Western world had called this country Persia, which was actually a Greek word that Europe mostly associated with fairy tales, flying carpets, and exoticism. Reza Shah issued a very official directive to all foreign embassies. Stop calling us Persia, use our true, ancient name, the one we've actually called ourselves for millennia, Iran. This wasn't just some linguistic whim, it was a bold statement. It basically told the world, we are not an exotic colony. We are a modern, powerful nation, and you are going to reckon with us.
The history of this land is always a history of radical pivots. Throughout the 20th century, the Pahlavi dynasty pushed really hard for rapid modernization. But being relentlessly caught between the competing interests of global superpowers led to decades of intense political turbulence and foreign interference. Ultimately, this undeniable chain of cause and effect culminated in 1979. The country exploded into the Islamic Revolution. The monarchy fell, the nation formally shifted into a theocratic republic, and its relations with the West were effectively severed. And that leaves us with a truly stunning historical paradox today. In the mind of the modern world, two completely different realities exist simultaneously for the exact same piece of land. The word Iran immediately triggers stark, serious images of modern geopolitics, harsh sanctions, and international tension. Yet the word Persia hasn't disappeared at all. It retains this relaxed, mythical aura of refined poetry, flying carpets, and lost ancient grandeur. Two names for one land, basically representing a relentless, ongoing struggle over exactly how it will be remembered by history.
Over 5,000 years, this culture developed the ultimate mechanism for survival. They absorbed the very empires that actively sought to destroy them, and they even invented the concept of linear time we all live in today. But perhaps their greatest battle is taking place right now. Because sometimes, hidden right behind the simple name of a country, is a quiet, invisible war. A war between who they were in the past, who they are today, and how the rest of the world actually wants to see them. Who will ultimately win that battle of identity? It's a fascinating question, isn't it? One that leaves us with so much more to explore. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.